Yo, what's going on, man? You know what I'm saying? Podcast. We are back in the building, man. We're back to have conversations, man. Unfortunately, we have to talk about another shooting, another attack against black people for living, just existing, being murdered for just existing. That and that's it. A continuation of things in this country, on ideals in which it was founded on. If you know about the Three Fifths Clause, if you know about the Declaration of Independence and how they didn't want to take out slavery, things of that nature. So we're here today, man. The conversation that we're gonna have today is, we're gonna talk about there's no lone wolves, man. A lot of this conversations is about these people who folks say are individual actors, and they're not individual actors. There are people who influence, who give people ideas and ideals. You know what I'm saying? And it just takes an individual to carry out. And of course, this white supremacist terrorist had a manifesto. They leave manifestos because they know there are other people. There's a cycle, exactly. They know that there's a cycle. They know that again, there's no lone wolves. They know that there is somebody else out there who's willing to, commit a similar attack. Go ahead, Doc.
No, man, and when you say no lone wolves, I think it's important to note that we study wolves in captivity.
Mm-hmm.
We study human wolves in captivity, and knowing that they only operate in certain ways when they are being monitored than they do when they're actually out on the prey. If you look at how a wolf pack actually attacks, you have the lead wolves who go out in front. They're not the strongest wolves, but they go out in front to alert the pack to danger. And so what you're seeing happening now is the vanguard, or essentially the tip of the spear of the people who have been radicalized first to go out first. So in the order in which they were radicalized, and so you're seeing a lot of these age demographics where, and it's a sad commentary that I don't believe that the U.S. government is doing enough to, first off, study how are these white domestic terrorists being radicalized.
Right.
What are we doing as a society to prop up this ideology, thoughts, feelings, and or beliefs? And ultimately, what are we doing to mitigate the harm? But ultimately, what are we doing to prepare the people who are victims of the violence?
Right.
Apart from telling them that we denounce violence. Well, saying I denounce violence, it's like saying I like to breathe. We all like that. We all would like not to have violence. But until we use language, and I will tell you again, like as I've been telling as many people as I can tell, that our definition of power is fundamentally misconstrued.
Right.
As power is the ability to define my reality and to have other people respond to my definitions as if they were their own. Now, I understand that I'm going to get more power if more people share my definition than share their definition. And I think we don't talk about the logical necessity that racism created in America, because racism played on the natural instincts of humanity. And that's how to get power. And when it comes to getting that power, we see that these individuals will do anything, including murder, to keep, and perpetuate that power.
Yeah, there's a historical precedence of that, right? Whether we talking Tulsa, Rosewood, you even had white supremacists that overthrew white folks in government, right?
Yes, Wilmington, North Carolina,
right? You know what I'm saying? There's a historical track record, of this,
yes.
and we don't have, as far as black people, we do not have these conversations in power, and so it is very misunderstood, and we deal with a lot of misinformation because we've never seen black people with power. We only have stories, right? And those stories, are, it gets muddy. You know what I'm saying?
Fast.
Yeah. It gets muddy fast. So yeah, we most definitely need to understand power.
Oh yeah.
Understand how to use power. I ain't use power, but understand what power is. You know what I mean? Dynamics of America, right? Understanding what that is in America. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and as we have become divided, we understand that the best strategy to keep me from power is to divide me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the divisive issues that we see in our community is when these tragedies like Jacksonville happen, you will see a certain demographic of Black conservatives primarily who they will tout out in front of us to tell us there aren't no problems here, to say America's not racist. They'll come out and say, all violence is just bad. Well, I condemn violence, but not addressing the issue. This
Right.
is talking about it, because ultimately what I say conservative in the most denotative way. I mean someone who wants to keep the status quo. So somebody will say something to me like, what should we do about racism? What should we do about white supremacy? But they're not asking the question because they want to know.
Right.
They're asking the question to make it seem like you can't do nothing about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And see, I reject the idea that on the scale that I can't do anything about it, because I can challenge the arguments that are made to support it. So I put a post out there. I said, look, man, I wait for Black conservatives to say things so that I can understand what their next argument is, because they haven't really got a lot of new material lately. So the sheriff in Jacksonville was talking about the Black family after this tragedy. He was saying something about the Black community. And I'm like, if you want to talk about the Black community, go ahead.
Yeah.
Feel free at your leisure. But there is a time when you don't have to say nothing. You could just be quiet. You can let people grieve. You can let them mourn. But when it comes to American politics, we'll understand something that, and this is where it's very important, is they understand that emotional people should not be making policy. If something traumatic is happening to me, then I might be a little biased in my adjudication of what I assess. So now I'm getting with other people to make sure that I'm on the right page, so that I'm not thinking that, man, maybe that's too extreme. Maybe it's too extreme to say, hey, Florida, y'all more concerned about teaching the children about what happened to them than y'all seem to be about stopping it from happening.
Yeah, or not teaching it, right? Like
Or
they
not teaching it.
took away African American history. You know what I'm saying? So that these folks who get inspired to be white supremacists don't learn anything, right?
Don't learn nothing.
Yeah, they don't learn anything. So, but they are also again, we talking about that there's no lone wolves, that they are constantly bombarded with anti-Black rhetoric and anti-Black messaging. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Especially in the South, deep South, it's Confederate flags. You know what I mean?
That argument.
Yeah, it's Confederate flags. It's Black kids going to Jefferson Davis High School. It's, you know what I mean? Like it's all types of stuff, man, that they're bombarded with. It's Fox News. And then, like you're saying, it's the Black folks, right? It's the who sanction this stuff, right? Like a Candace Owens, a Larry Elder, Jason Whitlock. They'll just come out of the woodworks and they're, oh well, let's make a mental health argument, or let's make an argument that,
and see, I understand that America is a market-based economy, and there happens to be a market for Black people who will say insensitive things to other Black people among their tragedy.
Yeah,
it does too. There's a market for that, and as long as there's a market for it, it's going to exist. Now, I probably submit to you that market knows that they cannot say the exact same thing that those Black folks are saying. And they can give them some kind of cover. Well, they'll be like, well, Candace Owens agrees with me, and I am not really concerned about who agrees or disagrees with anyone, because that's a personal choice. What I think about when I say power, I say it in the construct of power is the ability to let me know that there is a threat, to define that threat and say, listen, these racist supremacists are doing research before they attack Black communities.
Yeah,
they're not just randomly getting guns and running to Black communities. Sometimes they are reconning the location. Sometimes they're actually doing little dry runs, little stop go things. Then they're just waiting for the opportunity. So we understand that they are looking at the demographics. They're looking at cities that are predominantly over 75% Black, so that they have a higher chance of encountering Black people.
Or they're doing or they're doing like, the Republican Party that was studying how black people voted, and then they created laws
To
to hinder how black people. They're like, oh, y'all want to do souls to the polls? Okay, well now we're making a law where you can't do souls to the poll. Oh, y'all like collecting older people's ballot harvesting? That's what they call it.
bringing them, yeah.
Yeah, y'all like collecting older. Y'all like doing good for older people in y'all's community. Y'all want to do that? Collecting their ballots and dropping
Yeah.
it off. Oh, you can't do that anymore. Old boy at Mother Emanuel here in South Carolina, he knew black people went to that church. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? The Buffalo shooter, he knew black people had the one supermarket that they had to you know what I'm saying? The
So yeah,
dude,
but yeah,
the
but
dude
when
in
you, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but let's take it a step further and say that the individuals you're talking about
Hmm.
primarily were acting in a way that led them suspicious because they were trying to do something direct action.
Hmm.
What we don't see focused on with those lone wolf is that indirect action.
Hmm.
I'm going to blow up the power grid in Baltimore,
Yeah,
predominantly black city, because if I blow up the power grid, I know it can create chaos. And
yeah.
therefore, that chaos can lead to what I want in that Turner Diaries. We
Hmm.
understand they have a manifesto, but we ultimately understand that whether or not, I I understand why the government is reluctant to call these things what they are,
Hmm. Hmm.
because there is no way to profile, or as of right now, the potential people who have been radicalized in this country since they radicalized them from birth. There is no way to essentially account for the number of people that could potentially be
Hmm.
extremists.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
don't know, because we're seeing that the parents, for some reason, when they ask the parents of these shooters, they ask them, when did you see any signs? And they're
Hmm.
all like oblivious. We
Yeah.
took them to church on Sunday, and like you didn't know you was raising a terrorist, huh?
A terrorist. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so there wasn't nothing in your house. There
Hmm.
wasn't nothing that you could see and talk to your kid about race to see that he had some ideas that were outdated. Or
Hmm.
maybe you didn't feel comfortable talking to your child about his views
Hmm.
and just assume that those ideas were gone.
But I think that one thing that I won't say fascinate me about people who identify as white is that they do not talk about race, right? Not they don't have any conversations about it. They don't talk about it in a an identity, because I say white people are tribal. They're not there's no culture. There's no it's people from up north, down south, Midwest, and the South. I mean, and the West. You know what I'm saying?
Pick
And
one.
and they separate. You're right. They separate themselves, and so they don't have any real conversations on race, because race doesn't affect them, whether they believe left, right politically, whether they're poor
Yeah.
or wealthy. The race does not impact them. Well, if you're poor or white, it does. But
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, but race does not directly impact them, so they don't have conversations outside of anti-blackness or
Yeah.
anti-immigrant or anti this or that. So they then connect to this rhetoric. They'll connect to a Fox News or OAN or anything else, because they don't have a reference point, right? They don't have nothing to bring them back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know what I'm saying?
And what we don't tell people about whiteness in America
Mhm.
is that for most of US history, whiteness has been considered like property.
Right,
So
exactly.
when I'm white, I possess some intrinsic value from my whiteness. Meaning, like, if I'm white, then no black person can take me to court,
Hmm.
because no black person can testify against me. See, whether I own slaves or didn't, that still applied to you.
Hmm.
And although we don't like the term white privilege or white, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
we need to explain the phenomenon.
Right.
See, when you are affected by a problem that you are researching, you're going to research from a different perspective,
Hmm.
because I am going to be affected by what I find.
Hmm.
I am going to be affected, but ultimately, when I research, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to conceptualize a framework that can incorporate people who don't agree with me.
Hmm.
Because if I can incorporate people who don't agree with me into the framework, then the framework only explains half the problem. It's like
Yeah.
I can tell you my perception, my perspective on an issue, but at the same time, I don't have a perspective to explain what's happened to you.
Right.
Because when you're white, you don't like to be studied. You see,
Mhm.
when you're black, you've been studied so often, you feel like being studied is just normal.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why are people studying white behavior,
Yeah.
white culture? Well, we're studying it because we understand that it's something inherent in it that is having an effect on us.
Mhm.
Whether you want to call it whatever you want to call it, but it exists. And the things that we have done to delude ourselves to think it does not exist is align ourselves with people for their power because we think it's the best bet. For example, if you are a black person and you think it's in your best interest to be subservient to white supremacy, then go forth. If you
Yeah.
think that is in your best interest, execute. But don't tell me that the problem is unsolvable if you don't want to think about solving it.
Right.
Tell me the truth. If you ain't interested in the solution, but you want to talk about the problem, you what James Baldwin called my biggest threat.
Yeah.
Because if you understand what I'm going through and you don't want to explain it to address the phenomenon I'm addressing, not to say, well, yes, we need to talk about other issues. Yes, there's a forum for that. There's many forums, but this issue we're talking about is singular. And when we talk about a singular issue, I think the concern in Herman said, what is the solution? See, and I think that that's the idea.
Mm.
The idea is that nobody has a solution. If
Yeah.
they had a solution, then we wouldn't have to talk about it.
Right.
But the idea is that the solution comes from when we reacclimate ourselves to the problem. When we say, can this problem be solved? If we don't think it can be solved, if we think it's not going to change, then what is our best way to act in it? So if it's not going to change, if nothing's going to be solved, how should I behave? What should I do for my power?
Yeah. How do you survive? How do you maneuver? How do you make decisions on finances?
And this is where I believe the conservative argument has been the strongest. I think it's been the strongest because the idea is to say, if we just assimilate, we can get some of the crumbs from the table.
And this is Booker T. Washington's argument, right?
And eventually,
hey man, look, we can't figure this out. I mean, like, look, they ain't gonna give up power. Booker T. Washington says this. They're not gonna give up power. So we got to figure out how to maneuver.
I'm going to start with my definition of power first.
Yeah.
Power is the ability to define your reality and have other people accept your definition as their own. I will give you an example. If I said, what is your definition of power? Right? You tell me what yours is. If I disagree with your definition, I don't have to accept it as my own. If I like your idea, then I can take it as my own. And the way I usually see ideas catch fire is because the author of the idea is not the same one who is going to perpetuate the idea.
Yeah.
And
go ahead, Doc. I was going to just to answer that question.
But I understand that the idea comes from this idea that we try. Like, eventually, if you were a researcher and you've tried something and you've kept getting the same results, you would think that I may need to try something different.
Yeah.
My grandmother assimilated in U.S. culture. My grandmother was the first Black librarian at one of the first Black librarians in the city, right? Assimilate, right? But and then what I see happening, it's not that it's not a good strategy. It's that the younger generation don't want to assimilate no more. Yeah. The older generation who has assimilated are good with their assimilation. The younger folks are like, why we got to assimilate to this foolishness? Because I believe if there is going to be a solution, it's going to come from the people who are going to come after us, because they're the ones that are going to get fed up with the system. And they're the ones that are going to, we are lighting the fire, we are planting a seed, but it will ultimately, I believe, come from the change in the idea of the thinking, because once we have the same definition of power, then we can build on it. But if you think power comes from that way, and I think power comes from this way, then there won't be a conduit that can link us to joint power, so that now we can go and list somebody else who agrees with us. And if they agree with us and somebody else, then power grows this way.
And this is what Martin Luther King talks about in Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, right? Yes. He tells Black people, like, hey, look, there ain't too many of us. So you need to ally with other groups. And a lot of people get his condemnation of liberals wrong, because people will be like, ah, man, Martin Luther King chastised liberals because he didn't like them. No, he chastised liberals to try to get them to focus, because that is
Yes.
the only group that is willing to do something, right? It's the same thing, what I mean, when he's talking to white Christians. He is talking to them to trying to get them to focus to do something, you know what I'm saying? And so, so when we let me address something real quick because it's on my mind. But like, we need to understand language, right?
Yes. Yes.
First of all, if we have to understand language, we have to understand that there is no American culture. If you think that there is an American culture, you are centering white people and whiteness, right?
Yes.
There is not one singular American culture, right? So when you assimilate, what are you assimilating to? You know what I'm saying? What are you assimilating to? Of course, we had this, in the Asian community, you had the model minority, right? There was actually two court cases where two different groups of Asians in the Mississippi Delta uh, took school to court, simply to say that their Asian children should not be going to the quote unquote colored schools because they are more white than
Yes.
they are, colored. And the Supreme Court was like, hell nah, y'all are colored. Get them kids back to the colored school. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then and to touch on what you were saying about whiteness equals property,
Yes.
the story of a black girl. She becomes one of the wealthiest teenagers.
Yeah.
She
I know.
becomes
Sir. Yep.
Yep, she become one of the wealthiest teenagers in America. And long story short, they changed her racial category to white
Yes.
because she owned property, because she owned oil fields, and that's what she and things of that nature. In Hawaii, when Hawaii was taken over, the people that they let own land, they had to be racially categorized white. The indigenous people in this country also have to be racially categorized white. And individuals who come over here after 1965, during the brain drain,
Yes.
when you immigrants that come over here from India, specifically from India
Yes.
or the Middle East, they are racially categorized as white. So,
Yes.
trying to get folks
And
just
and, and to be clear, I want to really address something really close to that,
hmm
what you're saying about language,
hmm
because what we are doing is theorizing. We're what did y'all assimilate to when y'all joined the military and retired? Just curious. Okay, so I'm gonna trust. So when you're talking about language, what I like to think of is that if power is the ability to define my reality and to have other people accept my definition as their own, then I'd have to say, and I told this guy before, I said, listen, man, if all of the white people were gone tomorrow, there would still be white supremacy on the earth.
Right.
Because we don't know anything different. And since we don't know, well, let me rephrase that. The vast majority of westernized, this diaspora folk don't know. That should be a little more clarified, because I do believe that there is an awakening happening. So since we are theorizing, see, what people want is they want solution in the theory. The theory is not the solution. I think they're trying to conflate the term. You get theory to conceptualize the problem. See, most people haven't even conceptualized how big the problem is. We're talking about economics, education, entertainment, law, labor, politics, religion, sex, war, and then Dr. Francis Questle added health. And that's what Neely Fuller conceptualized. So I'm going to take his construct and I'm going to build on that. Because that doesn't really define the problem, that just outlines the issues. So now I have to see, how does the issues interact with each other? So now I can say, wait a minute, we can attack education, but guess what's coming to its defense? Now law is coming to help it out. We can attack economics, but then labor comes to its defense. We can attack politics, but then you're going to bring up this. And so what we are creating is an environment where we're trying to conceptualize and solve at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
So
we're trying to solve inequalities, but then there's other kinks and like, y'all want to solve, you want minimum wage.
So I would ask Herman, I would say, do you want to theorize with us? Like, Herman, do you want to, Mr. Brown? Is it Herman Brown?
Yeah.
Like, would you like to theorize with us? Because if you want to theorize with us, then I will see you as part of the solution.
Mhm.
If you just want to tell us what you think
Mhm.
so we can think what you think, then we're going to have a problem because I disagree with some of your approaches. Now, I would tell you why I disagree, because I think that what I've seen happening is things that we've tried to do that have not been successful. It's like
Mhm.
I keep playing chess with you and you keep beating me. I need to change my strategy. Maybe I need to do the Queen's Gambit because we've been doing the Sicilian defense, but now I need to up my level of play, or I need to think deeper into the framework because the problem is so big I can't conceptualize it because I'm a part of it. So it
Mhm.
uses me. So, for example, nobody pays me to talk about Black people in public forums. If
Right.
I'm doing it, it's because I want to do it. But my mom told me, hey, look, you don't talk about Black issues without, unless it's about Black people. You know,
Mhm.
you talk about your issues in your community because white people don't talk about their issues in their community with us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
When
yeah.
they go shoot up that, when them kids get shot up, you know, we ain't hearing a discussion about what is going on with white parenthood in America, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Why
Mhm.
are these kids being radicalized to murder people for race? What is happening? Well,
Mhm.
can we get a Harvard study? Can we
Yeah,
get somebody to look into this? Because I bet you the government ain't trying to answer that question. Because if the government answers the question, they're gonna be complicit.
yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so the question becomes: is assimilation negative? I think it is a survival skill. And I
Mhm.
think when we talk to people in America, they look at it from a survival lens.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to survive, to
Uh,
thrive, to feed your family. You got to take care of your kids. You got these bills you got to pay. So you need to understand how to operate and maneuver in these Eurocentric waters.
and that's what I was going to bring up too, man. When you're talking about assimilation, like the vast majority of people who join the military come from a certain social economic background. Let's just be real about that.
That's
You
true.
know, whether you black, white, it doesn't matter the racial scale. You come from a certain social economic background.
You're saying
So
you're saying primarily people who are poor go join the military.
yeah, I mean, look where recruiting stations are at. Man, I tried to tell somebody this when I was in, man. Like, look where recruiting stations are at, man.
Yeah.
Are they are where they are at on purpose. It got to the point to where, oh man, there was a school, a majority black school. I can't remember. This was a few years ago, where they stopped recruiters from coming to their school. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was. I think was it Ivy League or something, or was it like a?
Man,
I
I
know what you're
can't.
talking about, though. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, I don't think that people join the military to assimilate. People join the military because it is to survive. Because you get a check on the first and the 15th,
yeah,
and the most important part, I think, of it is that while you are in the military, you are protected from isms. You're protected from the system. But by
right.
and large, you're protected from capitalism, right? You don't have to apply for it. You don't have to worry about being turned down for a job because your name sounds funny or you got, because of your hair or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Military privilege.
Yeah, you are protected from
Yeah,
isms. You don't have to worry about, if your rent, if a landlord want to raise your rent, that's fine because guess
yeah,
what? You can move on base. Your kids get health care, your spouse get health care. You are protected. You are protected. You know what I'm saying? In the military. You know what I'm saying? So it's not so much that people assimilate, it's that people see the military for what it is. It's a jobs program. It's to keep
yeah,
people a population of people from being poor, you know what I'm saying, or being, going into
yeah,
poverty, right? So again, I did not assimilate so that I lose my culture, right? I tell people that, you know what I'm saying, like pay attention to, an ethnic group, Filipinos. When Filipinos join the military, guess what they do? They go hang around other Filipinos. Like,
yeah,
just call it what it is. You know what I'm saying? When, what I mean, certain Hispanic groups do the same thing. If
yeah,
Dominican, if folks are Dominican, they go find other Dominican.
yeah,
Black people find other black people. White people find other white people. So it's not. So if you make the choice that you need to assimilate, you are noticing where the power is. You are noticing that I can get promoted if I act a certain way, if I talk a certain way, if I lose my culture, because black people are an ethnic group, if I lose my culture, and I assimilate to what I believe the power structure is, right? We see this with women too. Women do this as well. You know what I mean? They assimilate to patriarchal, power of man. You know what I'm saying? They
Mhm.
mimic men. You know what I'm saying? In certain ways. So assimilation is more than again language. Assimilation is way more
Yeah.
complex and it requires context than folks are giving it.
Yeah, and I think that when I say in America, assimilation was a strategy. Assimilation was logical because what we found is that if we did not assimilate, we would develop our own thing. I tell people a lot of times, I said, listen, the school systems in Brown v. Education were not integrated because America became less racist. The school systems were integrated because the people who were getting taught in their black schools, those kids were learning ideologies that were counterproductive to American hegemony.
And,
They
tho-
were
and
learning
those
about
families and those families did not want to integrate. They
yeah.
were saying, "Hey, we don't have good schools. We don't have buses. We don't have
And
we
what
don't have
happened and
all
what
they
happened when integration happened, you lost all of the black teachers because
yes,
you wouldn't let those black teachers go to those white integrated
go
schools and
to the
teach.
white exactly.
And so what we found out is we lost our biggest base of people having the incentive to educate themselves to what end is for their children. Because when you start to look at society, it's about what do we want to hand to our children? Because it's going to be other countries. Do you believe other countries desire people to assimilate? Yeah. So I think that when you start to talk about American society, what you see happening is that America follows a very used pattern throughout the world. It's usually colonialism.
Mhm.
And if power is the ability to define reality and have other people accept my definition as their own, then soft power is what I do to get that to come to pass.
Mhm.
So soft power is me saying, like, if I make a movie and people are saving the world, only people saving the world could be American.
Mhm.
Because the Americans are the only ones smart enough to save the whole world. We can't call nobody else. It's our job.
Yeah.
The Avengers is an American squad because America is number one. And we have to project that power. As far as cultural issues, I would say this, that every society, mostly throughout history, has had underclasses of people. This is not a new phenomenon. It was in Italy, it was in Europe,
Mhm.
the Dregs, the Slavs, the Gypsies,
Wow.
the
Yeah,
Poles.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's not a new phenomenon to have a class of people in their society that does not have equal status to everybody else.
Mhm.
What you see in Americans is that what sustains that?
Mhm.
What sustains that has been changing, but the underlying premise has not. And so in America, I think we start off with this fundamental idea that power is more important than anything else.
Mhm.
Power first. How do I keep conceptualized power? How do I get it? Because when we look at the philosophies that we get from Europe, we have do the ends justify the means. We have utilitarianism. Does this create the most amount of good for people? Then we go into Hegel. We go into the rationality of the philosophy of being right. So we have a lot of different thought processes that we are trying to wrestle with. But then
Mhm.
you'll understand the only reason that there's so much war in the world is because we're wrestling with philosophies that don't reconcile themselves.
Yeah.
We're wrestling with philosophies that don't reconcile themselves. And because they don't reconcile, they will create conflict no matter where you employ them at. Whether
Mhm.
it's America, whether it's Brazil, whether it's any China, anywhere in the world, you will have the same problem if you create this environment where people are essentially saying, listen, I don't want to accept what you say to me anymore. I reject your characterization, your depiction of my history here.
Mhm.
And I think you are not even qualified to teach me my history here. Firstly, because you don't know it. So
Mhm.
if you don't know something, you shouldn't be able to teach it. And second, the reason is because you may know it, but you do not know it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might have the education knowledge, but you don't have the experience. You don't know what it's like to walk into an elevator as a black person and
Mhm.
have people cringe in fear. You don't
Right.
know that. And
Right.
I'm not
Right.
saying you need to know that. But when you don't know something, it's hard to teach it to people as if you are an authority on the subject. So I submit to you that Black people are the authority on racism effects in this country because we've endured it the longest. We know what we've done to it. We know what we've done to internalize it.
Right.
We know what we've done to survive despite it. And because
and how racism is within our own culture too, right?
so,
We have
yes,
we have
because
colorism, right? We have to, you know.
well, let me tell you this. The only reason, because you know my definition of racism, because I told them the word ends in ISM.
ISM.
That means it is a system or a structure.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's a system or structure. Did Black people create any systems or structures in America? Okay, I don't think so. So therefore, when we participate, what you're seeing is that our people have seen the benefits of racism, and that is if I don't shake the racial tree, I can climb the hierarchical faster. Meaning, if I'm a smart Black person, I'm going to say it's not really in my best interest to talk out against racism because one, it ain't going nowhere. It's always going to be here, and I need to just be comfortable with it. So this is the defeatism mentality, I think. That is defeatism.
Yeah.
I reject that whole hypothesis. I reject that idea. And because I reject it, now I have to counter a new idea.
Right.
So now I need to get power with my ideas. So I have to theorize with people. Now, me and you, Tay, have to sit down and say, you know what? Is this the best strategy for Black people going forward? Or is what Herman is suggesting? Is that the best strategy? Because if Herman got a better strategy than me, then let's implement his strategy.
Right.
Because I'm an academic. If somebody got a better idea than me, then I want to do I want to see what they're doing. I've done some research a little bit. I've done a little bit of research. I've done a little bit of reading, and I've seen what their ideas lead to, because their ideas lead to what perpetuates racism. Their ideas to me are why racism doesn't stop, because you have to be a cog in it. You have to resist it. You have to say no. So when they say you can't get this job if you have dreadlocks,
right?
So in order to assimilate, I must cut off my dreadlocks.
Yeah.
Now, I don't cut off my Africanness.
Yeah.
I don't cut off my uniqueness, but I know if I want to. Remember that a couple years ago, the Black guy was wrestling in a competition, and they wouldn't let him wrestle, so they cut his hair off right there.
And I try to tell people this in the military all the time, like the military. You know, we know the military. Part of racist policies, military really just changed hair standards about 2017, 2016. One of the words that they took out, again, language, right, was unkempt, right? And we know unkempt
is a Black
only
term.
Applied. Exactly. It only applied to a certain group. So when we're talking about, these individuals are like women who had to perm their hair. Well, they had to perm their hair in order to assimilate so that they can get jobs. So it applied. I remember having a conversation with a black person one time. This was like last year or so, and I said that Black women spend more on hair care, and the military should compensate Black women. He's like, "You sure about that?" I was like, "Yes." I'm like, I have Black women in my household. Yes, we spend money. I was like, just to maintain standards, standards. Who set these standards? Who assimilate to the standard?
And if I ever meet your standard, all you have to do to keep your power is keep sliding it.
Is keep moving it, right? Because we think that there's the myth that we all have been told, you know what I mean, and you got to deconstruct this myth, is that there is a scale of racism, right? There's no scale. It either is or it's not. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's how you have to look at a lot of these issues. You know what I mean? Was it racist or wasn't it? You know what I'm saying?
And as a researcher, you know, my thought process is, where do I fit in this question?
Yeah.
Because what I see happening is I never act like this is a panacea issue. All you gotta do is flip some magic policy and it all just magically floats away. But we take this approach that it doesn't go away because we stop talking about it.
Right.
Well, if we just stop talking about it, it'll happen. That Jacksonville shooter was going to shoot up them kids or them people, regardless if we talk about it or didn't talk about it. His
Exactly.
ideology was already set. So when it comes to the idea of the lone wolf, I will talk about very briefly how we are radicalizing young white people in this country
Mm.
under everybody's noses because nobody's researching this.
Hmm.
Well, let me rephrase that. We are not being told anybody's researching this.
Yeah.
We're not being told that
Hmm.
the Department of Justice put a $5 million grant out for anybody who can find out more on why white children are being radicalized to murder black people in America.
Wow.
Right? Like, because let's get our greatest minds on this.
Hmm.
Instead of going to space and SpaceX and rocket, instead of trying to go into the deepest parts of the ocean, how about we figure out why I can't walk into Target or Family Dollar and not get blown up?
And it's not like the government don't know. The FBI said the biggest threat to America is domestic terrorism,
But you got
specifically right-wing white supremacists.
and they're radicalizing at a rate that is hard to track because they've already infiltrated law enforcement.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
the FBI already said that in 2008, white supremacists want to infiltrate law enforcement because their training is very low. They understand that they can get away with anything because our laws, all you got to do is say, I was fearful, and you can murder somebody literally like that. Go home, call it a day, drive 20 miles to the suburbs, and you're good.
Hmm.
And so what I try to do is when I talk to people, I make sure they understand the difference between theory and practice. Because
Right.
practice is what we are going to do once we have a theory.
Hmm.
But what I'm seeing happening is people are trying. You feel like the chances being killed by white supremacists high? Okay, good question.
Depending on where you at.
No, wait, no, no. I'm going to talk about this question because ultimately, I don't care what the number
That
is.
is a good question. No, that's a good question.
No, let me tell you something. Statistically, I am not likely to be a victim of police brutality. Statistically.
Hmm.
But what is my perception that I could be? See, the perception.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Doc, but that's because of your economics. Where you
Well, but
you don't have to do that.
what we're seeing that there's a dichotomy where I can be rich and be still afraid of the police by getting pulled over.
That's true.
My money will not insulate me from a cop on a power trip. Now,
Mhm.
so although I know that it's not statistically high,
Mhm.
it's actually very low, like about less than 1% or something. It's a very low number. But when you
Mhm.
look at the number of how does that affect my perception?
Mhm.
So now what the question says is that we should only, I'm assuming, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, that because it's not happening at that frequency, we should not be talking about it as much. If
Shouldn't
I'm
be.
wrong, then maybe I'm wrong. But if
Yeah.
that is the approach, then what I would say to that argument is this,
Mhm.
that how Black people have historically perceived things has not mattered quantitatively. No one has looked at our perceptions of anything and said, you know what, because Black people feel some kind of way, we're going to make some policy about it. It usually
Mhm.
doesn't happen that way. It's usually this problem is causing a problem for white people, so let's pass legislation. Okay, the Black Panther Party is arming themselves, so let's pass a law that says you cannot travel or carry your gun out in public. Okay,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, maybe come on, because so if you could explain a little more, because when people say that question to me, what it invokes in me is that the problem is not a big enough issue to get more resources, or the problem is not the biggest issue we're facing.
But I think that again, it's the definition of what white supremacy is. Like we think that people think that white supremacy is like the KKK or this person here, right? But it also is Ron DeSantis getting rid of African AP American history.
Yeah.
It's Arkansas, what they did in Arkansas, taking public funds from public schools where predominantly Black kids go to fund private
Yeah.
schools where primarily white kids go to. It's going to Cancer Alley in Louisiana, where those policies are passed by a majority white government, and it is affecting black people. So when we primarily wait until this quote unquote lone wolf attacks black people, but there's white supremacy happening all over this country. Look what happened in Tennessee. Look what happened in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Kids get murdered by a gun, but the white supremacist government was like, well, we don't want to take away guns, or we don't want to do anything about it, even though you have people who their solution
Yeah.
is more police on the street. Well, where are those police going to go?
Sure.
Who are the
Yeah.
police going to harass? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have to deconstruct how we think of
Yeah. Yeah.
supremacy in this country.
And create an environment
Don't
where
capitalize that W there, brother
yeah,
Herm. That
yeah,
yeah.
and create an environment where if we are having a disagreement over terminology,
Mhm.
what does this mean? Because I do not compartmentalize racism into how it is metastasized. I
Mhm.
see it as global. I see it as an issue that affects everyone, and it affects everyone differently and uniquely. So my response to it will be different and unique. But when it comes to this idea of what we are doing to radicalize the young people,
Mhm.
see, this is where I believe public policy can come into play at. Because
Mhm.
see, I think if public policy made the problem, then public policy should address the problem. That doesn't seem radical to me. That
No.
seems logical. That seems reasonable. It seems sound and rational that if the policy made the problem, then policy can fix the problem. See, what
Mhm.
we've done is we said, well, you know what, policy made the problem, but it's our responsibility to overcome the challenges from that policy so that we don't be considered like all them other black folks who couldn't.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that makes it like, look, if you survive, it's because you had the will, the fortitude to make your way out of here. You churned
Mhm.
your way out of that barrel. And if you don't make it, I don't have to say it was because of the policy. It's because you didn't work as hard as they did.
Because you didn't work as hard. Yeah, you didn't work hard enough.
And
You
I
didn't.
and I reject that hypothesis because it
Mhm.
does not explain the phenomenon that we are trying to address. And what we are trying to address is externalities.
Mhm.
Externalities are things that we do not control within our capacity in the black community. We do not control the Board of Education. Could we? Yes, it's a possibility. But do we currently now? No, we do not in a lot of these states. What's the
Mhm.
public policy that needs to change, or what policy should be implemented? I'm truly curious, how is this supposed to look? And see, this is where I'm saying, see,
Mhm.
people want to know what the outcome looks like, but they don't want to theorize.
Mhm. Mhm.
I need you to theorize, Herman. Theorize with us. Because if you want the solution, it has to look like what you want it to look like. And you might not want it to look like anything. I don't know that. But if you
Mhm.
don't want to, if you just want to go to the restaurant, order the food, but when the waitress come out with the food's cold, you can be mad at the chef, but the food had already been ready. It was in your mind. And I think that when we come together, we can say, listen,
Yeah.
Herm could say, hey, Dr. Ham, I hear what you're saying, but that ain't valid.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's
When in theorizing, what we can do is we can say we don't have to start with the theorizing to solve the problem. We might
Mhm.
compartmentalize the problem. We'll say, hey, the issue that we're having, because in my mind, they're all like dominoes. If you pop
Mhm.
one domino, you
Mhm.
get a ripple effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what has insulated is we not wanting to come together, theorize, and then see if our ideas are valid because they can handle scrutiny outside of our opinion.
Mhm.
Because if I'm saying something that's not valid, then you, Tay, are supposed to challenge it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Absolutely.
I don't care
Absolutely.
what my credential is. I don't care what my
Right.
title is. If I'm saying something that ain't valid, you should say, hey, you know what? Have you thought about it this way? Because
Yeah.
probably I haven't.
Right. Yeah. 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 And
But
one of my theories has always been is that r- racism and these issues that are connected to racism is white people's problem. You know what I'm saying? Um, uh, 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 who's that? Robin DiAngelo, she tried. to tell white folks, Jane Elliott, Tim Wise, they try to combine powers and tell white folk like, hey, look, you got to stop believing in the power of whiteness, and you have to come together and focus on issues that actually connect your humanity, that
Yeah.
actually connect you to people, economics, healthcare, environment, school. You know, what I mean, these are the things that you connect. If you simply are doing things based on your racial
Yes.
identity, right? Your tribalism, right? This is why we see poor white people constantly for generations now vote against their own interests to remain poor. People
Yeah.
don't like to talk about that, but you know what I'm saying? But anyway, but they have generationally voted and generationally supported policies and issues that does not benefit them in any sort of
Yes.
way generationally, you know what I'm saying? So you're not unless you as a black person, if you are afraid to not call out, white people when they're wrong, if your main purpose is protecting white folks, if you are protecting their fragility, right? If you are protecting them, then you're not helping. You're really not. You're really not. And like you're saying, there are just way too many. There are a minority of people who have a big enough voice, right? Candace
Yeah.
Owens and Larry Elders and stuff. They are primarily want to protect fragility. They do not. Therefore, we can
Yeah.
never come to a solution because you don't want to tear down. You don't want to tear down what's in here. You don't want to tear down. The idea.
Let's take that a step further. Let's say if we did come up with a solution, can it be implemented?
And again, it depends, right?
So when I so the
It
reason
depends on where you.
the reason that most people
Mhm,
can't theorize with you in real time
mhm,
is because it would require them to suspend temporarily what they know,
mhm,
think, and feel.
mhm,
I have to suspend what I know, think, and feel in order to receive information from you that I can validate independent of my own interest.
mm,
Now, that is a challenge because we're not taught how to do that. We view the world from our own standpoint. And when we are trying to look, that's why I made that post about research, because
mhm,
people think they are doing research.
mhm,
But if you don't know what you're talking about, you're just searching.
mhm,
Once you find out what you have searched for, then you can search again or research. And
mhm,
I'm researching to find out what the information didn't cover. So you read these books, right? And you're like, this book talks about this issue, but don't talk about this issue. Then I'm conceptualizing it. Now I'm trying to synergize different theorists. I'm
mhm,
going to take a little bit of Malcolm.
mhm.
I'm gonna take a little bit of I'm gonna take a little bit of this, a little bit of Du Bois, sprinkle a little Baldwin in there, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna mix them all up together and say, what did it create? When I put their theological frameworks together, what did it create? Well,
Mhm,
one person was an assessor of our situation. One person here said, by any means necessary. I like that strategy. I like that this person understands that there is nothing that can be off the table in order to achieve my goal.
mm,
Not religion, not my mama, nothing. It's
mm,
on the table because now that allows me to think beyond what I was capable of theorizing on. Now I can say, you know what, take all the parameters off of my theory because everything's on the table.
mm.
Because in order for them to keep power, everything's on the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's on the table.
Yeah, man. And we're here talking about lone wolves. There are no lone wolves, man. That's what we're talking about, man. We're talking about, how, when it comes to incidents of white supremacist violence, these individuals are influenced.
Yes.
They do not come up with these ideas by themselves. And it is not a mental health issue. And that's one aspect I want to touch on real quick, Doc,
Yeah.
is that we see politicians and we see folks who talk about, you got to be crazy to go just kill somebody over their skin color. Well, you vote against people simply because of their skin color, so you're crazy too. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
Like you know but you know uh I mean, all violence is all violence Well, I won't say all violence is yeah, all it depends on what you deem as violence, right? When because it is influence, right? This country was started by a violent act, right? Tossing tea in the harbor is a violent act. You know what I mean? Like, so it all depends on what you deem violence. But what I'm saying is that when a person deliberately take people off this earth because they believe that they have some sort of superiority and other people have inferiority or whatever reason, you know what I'm saying? You know, that idea doesn't get come out of anywhere, so you can't sit here and talk about this person has a mental health issue because then if that person is influenced by Candace Owens and they write like the dude in New Zealand said that Candace Owens influenced me to do this, well then Candace Owens got a mental health issue, right? Because she laid out the groundwork and the foundation
Yeah.
to to
Well,
influence.
so just so we're clear,
Hmm.
let's if we're going to use the definition of power as
Hmm.
the ability, and I tell you because it has to be controlling of your reality. See,
Hmm.
because if I'm not in control of my own reality, I can't be in control of nothing else.
Hmm.
So it starts with me controlling my reality and then me saying, how do I get other people to accept what I think as their thoughts? That's what power is. Because if you think that your thoughts are not mine, then you're going to have more ownership in with the idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I talk to people, mostly, I'm not really talking to a person anymore.
Hmm.
I'm talking to the idea that has possessed their mind.
Hmm.
So if an idea possessed your mind, then you will think from that construct of the idea that has possessed you. With a lone wolf, the idea is that I am a race soldier and that my responsibility is to keep whiteness, protect white virtue, protect white, essentially to conserve whiteness as powerful.
Hmm.
I will do this lone wolf attack in order to invoke the anger of other black people to want justice, which will then have a domino effect to activating more lone wolves because they're going to get upset and then you get pit pat. Now, in reference to frequency of the issues that we're dealing with the lone wolf, because what I think is happening is we don't know. We know how people are radicalized, but we don't know what is the exact last ratification. So was Tim McVeigh a terrorist or racist when he leveled the federal building in Oklahoma? There were all races of people in the building.
Terrorist. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he was a terrorist.
Terrorist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
I
was.
don't know. Anyway,
But
yeah,
yeah, but that comment gets to my point in how we, we have to understand terms, man. We loosely use terms. You know what I'm saying? You have to know what a racist is. You have to know what ist is.
yeah, a practicer of practitioner of it.
Right. A practitioner of it, right? So if you play an organ and if you play a organ and you are good at an organ, you are an organist. You are a scientist. You
Yes.
create something. You create a novel. You are a novelist. You have to create something. So Tim
Yes. If you
right?
own a lot of capital, you are a
Yeah, you
capitalist.
are a capitalist.
If I own the means of production, I'm an industrialist. But
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
don't, I'm not. And so when we say I, politics is war by other means. So essentially,
Mhm,
when we start talking about terrorism is a tactic, usually asymmetrical warfare to achieve an objective against a larger enemy that you cannot meet.
mhm,
My thought process is that I'm not as concerned about what we are calling people because I think
mhm.
that's a distraction.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
To me, remember there's four sides of racism: institutional, systemic, interpersonal. Because I think we most racism is interpersonal. If you
Yeah.
because that's what you experience every day.
Mhm,
Most people who are experiencing the type of structural racism or internalized racism are the ones that tend to be more successful in the structure because they have deduced that racism as it is currently constructed is the best system that we've gotten so far.
mhm.
Like This is it. Like you might have some ideas and some theories about a better system, but as of right now, the one that's in charge didn't get here by accident.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we didn't accidentally wake up with this systems. It got here because people with power enforced their definitions on other people. They've accepted them and said, and then they've also told you how to get the power from them. Well, get your education. And I'm telling you, that's why until you go beyond bachelor's degree, you're not questioning theory in school. You're not questioning theory. You're questioning how to apply what somebody who's already done has taught how to do it, what they've done. I don't get to take your idea and run with it. And to the point of mental illness, the reason mental illness is a very good distinction is this. If you are insane and I'm insane, we would need a third party to validate which one of us is sane. So Herman would be, let's say he was listening, he would be the adjudicator. That makes sense. That doesn't make sense. Now, by him doing that, me and him can form together against you with power. Now we can say these are our definitions. You are the minority. Now that don't mean you're wrong, but when it comes to power, we will exercise it on you. And the ultimate power that we have is if you don't accept my definition and I need you to, then I can take your life.
Yeah.
At the threat of violence, if you don't accept my definition. So now we have a contrast. America, if you want to use a mental illness model, America has two illnesses going on simultaneously. And when half of the population thinks the other half is insane, we can't reason with them anymore. Because I think you're insane. You're not being logical.
Yeah.
Like I was telling them, guy, I said, look, you can have an illogical idea for absurd reasons for a logical purpose if it's designed to keep your power.
If it's designed. And so what she's talking about is that, there was a lot of race science that was happening, right? This is where the term drapetomania comes from, or it came from. They just created it out of nowhere, out of the blue. All they did was give a definition to it, and they're like, and people are like, you know what, that makes sense. But not only did they give a definition to it, they told other people who couldn't read what it was. So what did it do to those people? It kept them in their condition, right? It kept the power.
Yes.
I always have power. So if you escape or want to escape, you're crazy, and you don't want to be crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Because if you're crazy, then my institution that I tell people is so wonderful, there's got to be problems with it if people are trying to get away from it. If it was so great, people will be coming to it.
People be going to it,
but they're not. And so drapetomania, I think, is the framework when we view race in America. Because I must be crazy if I want to be free.
Yeah.
I must be crazy. Look, Massa feed me good on plantation. He give me corn and Sweetwater cornbread, and I get ham hocks and I get bacon, and it's good here. You know, and I'm like, this is the mentality, and I'm okay with that. Like, look, if you're happy, execute the mission. But I'm talking about, don't look at me and then say, well, why you want to mess up what we got here?
Why you want to mess up? Why don't you want to? Why don't you want
to? And as I talk to people, what I'm gathering is that most people are cowardly when taking a stance on moral issues. They want to wait and say, what side is the wind blowing so that I can make a stand on what I feel? Because if I move too early, I'm going to be called radical.
Right. Exactly.
If I wait too late, then I'm going to be called just a bandwagoner. So people want to find the correct social balance. And we learn this from social learning. We learn this is that what conversation, see, the thing about me is this. You're going to get the conversation from me no matter who's around.
Right.
Conversation. If white folk around, ain't nothing I'm saying different. If black folk around, nothing I'm saying different. Because one thing about me is that if I am not consistent with what I say, then I cannot control my own reality.
Right.
If when the white folks come, I got to put on my tap dance and
Yeah, you got to turn down your blackness. That's why.
Turn them
That's
back.
why I
Oh
call it.
yeah. But
Yeah,
then
you got.
when I'm with my Negro, I put my hat on to the back. I'm
Yeah,
code
exactly.
switching.
Code switching.
I'm code switching, doing all these things because I do not understand what power is. Power comes from me being able to be me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
I'm
And
me
not changing.
everywhere you see me. I don't have a definition of friend around white people and definition around black people.
Right.
My
And
friend,
I think that gets to the point we were talking about assimilation, right? Like,
yeah,
assimilation, it doesn't mean that you got to change. You know what I mean? It just means that you are surviving in that moment. However,
yes,
the point where changing comes with power,
yes,
because the overarching society tells you you have to change. You know what I'm saying? You can't speak Ebonics, right? You can't speak Ebonics. Oh, somebody had a question about, ask and or kids. There's some video about somebody saying ask and stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah, how is it racist if you ask a kid to change how they speak? Like, yeah, I mean, because that's again, we all speak a colonized.
So, but let's go with it. Let's use
Yeah.
this thought and let's look because most people don't want to. There's a word that most people don't want to use in our community.
Mm-hmm.
It's called intergenerational.
Mm-hmm.
People don't like that word because when I say intergenerational, then I gotta explain why I ain't got no generational wealth.
Why ain't you got exactly?
I gotta explain because
but you have to know, but you also have to know why. You have to know. You have to know.
So we don't like to talk about intergenerational policy.
Yeah.
Because if we talked about intergenerational policy, then we have to talk about the conditions that created that situation. In order to do that, we would have to address something that we don't want to talk about, and that's fine. That doesn't concern me. When I say intergenerational, what I mean is thoughts are ultimately intergenerational as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thoughts that people bring to me, if these were our thoughts in the 1970s or 1890s. That's what if I had a map and I put out on there the date that black people made these arguments. So the first time was it Kwame Ture made the Black Power argument. I was one of the first people.
Yeah,
and that was in the 60s, right? Black Power. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to take every idea, what I would say is, what ideas are we still wrestling with today?
Yeah.
Because those are the only ones that need my attention because the other ones don't work no more.
Mm-hmm.
See, I want the idea to be valid if we can use it. If you can't use it, like this goes back to Kant, the categorical imperative, meaning, I have disagreement with it, but it's like this. Don't do anything that you can't have somebody reproduce.
Mm.
Don't do an action that you would not want someone else to do. Meaning, I wouldn't want somebody to punch me in the face. I'm not gonna punch somebody in the face. I don't want anybody to steal from me. I'm not gonna steal from anybody else, right? Can the behavior be codified as a natural right across culture? Can we find principles that can be valid no matter where we use them at? If I go to India, to Timbuktu, if I do these things, I'm going to be received. This is where culture comes in. And culture says, if I'm in Japan, if I write your name in red, it means I want you to die.
Mm-hmm.
It means it's very serious. In America, writing somebody's name with red ink don't mean that.
Don't mean anything.
But if I go to Japan and I got a red pen and I write somebody's name in red, it means they're marked for death.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know that going into their culture and I have a red pen, this guy might think I want him harmed.
Yeah. So then he's going to act in a certain.
He's going to act. And so this is when I say, Herm, when I say certain things, you react a certain way, but the way you're reacting is the way people have been reacting. Like that's the reaction.
Right.
And if I want to change your reaction, I can only say something about the reaction. It don't produce nothing.
Yeah.
Like if it produced something, then keep acting that way.
Right.
Yeah. But it's like, I want to try something new.
Yeah.
And if we try something new, we're theorizing. We are not solving anything. This is theory. Because when my theory is correct on a small scale, then it can be moved to a larger scale.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do that because I want it to. It
Mhm.
does that because it can do that without any attributing to the author. That's why James Baldwin can speak to us today as if he was writing yesterday,
Mhm. Mhm.
because it still resonates what he was saying. It's like he was so far ahead of his time. He was speaking to our time now, but they wasn't ready yet.
Yeah, they weren't ready for it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ready. And
Goddamn.
we have people today that are saying things that people ain't ready for. But just
Mhm.
because you ain't ready for it, don't mean we gotta stop talking, because it's gonna make people comfortable.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah.
You know? And so
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I wrestle with, because if we don't wrestle with what have we done that can be reproduced? Is it
Mhm.
reproducible? Because if it doesn't solve the question, and if you're not like I would just rather have people be honest with me.
Yeah,
Say,
yeah,
look,
yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
interested in solving race, or interested in devoting any substantial amount of my time to theorizing or talking about racism, because I
Mhm.
feel it's not productive. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Appreciate it. Because
Mhm.
now we can move on.
Mhm.
We'll just
Yeah,
wait.
that's yeah,
You can just wait until the ideas become popular and follow
yeah.
like everybody else.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at on a lot of stuff. On social media. Sometimes I recognize that the person that I'm talking to, I'm
Yeah.
not necessarily. I comment because I'm not necessarily speaking to this person. I'm speaking to people who are going to view it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But when
The
it comes
audience.
to issues on race, and racism, yeah, man. Sometimes I'm like, want to um man, like get into a conversation, especially if I'm talking to a white person on race. But then I realized, like, man, this person just want to be invited to Thanksgiving. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't want to change behavior because they want to go to their family and hang out with their family, and you know what I mean, that they know that's going to be bigots and say bigoted things, and they're not going to, they want to be invited to Thanksgiving. So a lot of times, it does make it difficult to talk about race. But black people talk about race all the time. We just don't. We
Well,
we speak about it in politics. We speak about it in our music. We speak about it, in our art forms. You know what I mean? We talk about race all the time.
yeah,
It's just that the
yeah,
other folks just aren't spun up on it because they don't get directly or
yeah,
generationally affected by race and racism the way we have.
yeah. But then to your point, I say that I, I don't think that we have created an environment socially where I think this is where we're at today. If somebody asked me to assess our current state, I would say this: white people who identify as white have socially learned what they can or cannot say about black people in public. They learned that, in the 50s, we can't call them niggers anymore. That's not going to get us, that's not socially acceptable anymore. We can call them Negro. Negroes, color is still fine, but that word, we got to stop saying that. Now, we didn't tell white people to stop calling us that word in public. There was no committee where all the black people got down, sat down, and said, you know what, it's time for us to get this N word off the table. No, we didn't do that. They did. They socially learned that if I wanted to be considered a good member of society, I won't use that kind of language, because that language is connected to backwards thinking. So now I have to now change how I address you. Now, I don't have to change how I feel about you. I only have to change how I address you.
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
when nobody is around and we ain't in a social setting anymore, I can call you what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. I say it in my car. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. And
Yeah.
so my thought process is, we've learned how to put the mask of racism on and to act like a colorblind society. But in the boardroom, when they're hiring people, when they're making selections and they're saying, look at this name, is too ethnic for our position, or you know what, we shouldn't hire this person because they look like they're gonna come here and stir up stuff, because they look like they ain't gonna just sit up here and take our trash.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm assessing that I want to create an environment where people who are race conscious but race silent.
Yeah.
I want you to be silent because I don't want you to bring up at your lunch hour anything about this shooting in Jacksonville because that's going to make white people uncomfortable at the job. So I can't talk about racism at my job because that might make some of the white people uncomfortable. And because I'm looking at the world through a white gaze, I'm thinking, how can I make these white people feel comfortable and not speak the truth?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think about that. When I talk, I'm not thinking about how can I make these people comfortable? Because when I look at the history, what I'd say is that lynchings were not attended by like one or two people. Lynchings were state affairs. They held lynching at the state fairgrounds. Some lynchings had 20, 30,000 people. Like these were sporting events watching us get killed. So
Yep.
and they took their children here.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this issue isn't not just some fading issue of, well, the issue ain't as big because listen, I would like to ask people a question because I'm Socratic in my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I only get to the truth by asking questions because if I don't question what you're thinking, then I'm not going to be able to know. But I say, how many mass shootings should we have to endure before we create policy or do something to stop it? Is there a number? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 100? Like, is there a number that you think is acceptable before we should do more? Education wise, is there a number that you have in mind?
Mm-hmm.
Herman, do you have a number, Herman? Because if you have a number that you have in mind, then I could now theorize with that number and say, okay, we should probably be hitting that number in about 8 months because as things are picking up, because every time someone does one of these, somebody else feels like they're next man up.
Yeah.
That's
And
why the
again,
lone wolf is. It's next man up.
It's the next man up. And they again, when and again, just look at the age of these folks in these last few years. They're younger than 25.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so, so part of Martin Luther King, when Martin Luther King supposedly told Harry Belafonte he feels like he's taking his people into a burning house.
Yes.
He realized that to get the things that he wanted for black people, it wasn't going to it just not going to come because you're not going to be able to overcome white ideology, white supremacist ideology, because it existed on the left or the right. You know what I'm saying? But if you look over the last few years, of all the rhetoric that has happened, you know what I mean, as along with getting rid of African AP American history in several schools and things of that nature. Well, you also had a president who was running for president at that time, Trump, and he got rid of diversity, equity, inclusion. He talked about how we shouldn't be promoting, having promoting somebody or having somebody of race and all this other stuff. You know what I mean? Look at all the people who had DEI jobs getting fired from schools because they were, their DEI. You know what I'm saying? So again, there's, I'm saying that there's no lone wolves because this is the message today was the message of yesterday. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit lighter. You know what I mean? They're not out here calling black people savages and all this other stuff. They're just, they're just using.
And one of the things that I would encourage people to search, not research. No.
Yeah.
You have to search first.
Yeah.
Search, create some conclusions, and then after you've done that search, then relook at it again and see it the same way. But I'd say that when you start to talk about policy here, I am familiar with the voices that have come before us that were pessimistic. And I don't think that they were pessimistic because they got jaded. I think they were pessimistic because they accepted the reality. They've accepted some things that maybe you accepted too.
Yeah.
And maybe they accepted them because they didn't see a way out. And that's fine. And I think that when you start to talk to me, I think about how to get theory to practice. Because the Wright brothers want to fly. They have a theory. They have to take that idea now and make it operable. operational.
Mhm.
And what I see happening is the operational aspect doesn't really come together, because when we are start to talk about what does it look like, we don't know. See,
Mhm.
we want to know that there is treasure at the end of the map.
Mhm.
We want to know that at the end of the rainbow, I am getting some kind of, I'm getting some kind of benefit for
Mhm.
doing this.
Mhm.
Do I hear what you're saying? But we still have gang warfare culture devastating our communities. Where are the policies to deal with that? We need to start with home base first, don't you think? Now, see, this is where I think we get into the one of the biggest problems. I am not really concerned what you think is first, second, third, or fourth.
Mhm.
Like the order does not matter, because the problem is not in order.
Right, exactly.
The
Yeah, exactly.
problem is not in order. So when you put numbers to something that has no order, you create confusion and chaos.
Mhm.
So what you have to first do, I don't know who that person was, but what you have to first do is you have to delineate the scope of your ability to address the issue. I do this by saying there are internal issues in the Black community that we can address. So that comment would have been an internal issue, something
Mhm.
that we can do that don't require nobody else.
Right.
That's
Mhm.
just an internal Black thing. We can talk about that offline. We can
Mhm.
address that. But when it's time to talk about white supremacy and the effects of the externality on us,
Mhm.
it ain't the time for that conversation.
Yeah.
Don't make it less valid. Don't make it any less important. Don't make That's why I don't like to do step one, step two.
Step
That is,
1, step 2. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
because
Nah.
steps create
What's the issue?
confusion,
Yeah.
because you
What's the
might be on step six already.
Yeah, yeah.
Because to that person who wrote that, just know this, that all Black people did not leave the plantation on the same day.
Yeah.
We didn't all just get up one day and say, we're done with the slave stuff. You got people right now who live in the same area where their people were enslaved at today. They're there right now. They
We
haven't
got
gone,
people who were born on a
yeah,
plantation.
they haven't gone anywhere. And your family has been off the plantation for 100 years.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at them and saying, well, let's prioritize things. And they're like, prioritize? I'm trying to eat today.
Mhm.
Trying to eat today. I'm trying to survive. I'm dealing with an existential crisis of meaning. I'm
Mhm.
dealing with I'm dealing with the dissolution of what I had my faith in. I'm
Mhm.
dealing with I'm dealing with a lot of issues, and I don't have time to prioritize what you think is first.
Yeah.
That's why where I come in, because if I don't think or agree that this issue is first, then make a better argument to me. See, if your argument is this should be first because of A, B, C, and D, then we can talk about that. Maybe
Mhm.
I agree with A, and maybe I would say in the internal issues, this is high priority.
Mhm.
External, this actually hurts us.
Mhm.
Because when do any other communities get together and address their concerns? So when are the white people gonna get together and talk about Black people being murdered as a group? See, they don't have to do that. But see,
They barely get together. They don't even get together when white folk are being murdered.
well, if you want to go historically, the only time really there's been unity among different demographics of different ethnic groups that came from European that call themselves white now. That's
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
they didn't always call themselves white.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Mhm.
I tell people before the 1930s,
Yep.
crime statistics in America were itemized by European nationality.
Ethnicity. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, they
Ethnicity and
only
nationality.
it
Yep.
only became white or Black when they wanted to quantify how evil we were.
And that was in the 1960s. So they were like, "Oh, well, hold up.
Yeah.
All right, we about to pass this legislation. We about to pass this civil rights legislation. Y'all, all y'all Europeans are now white."
And so what I see people happening is I see people who theorize from a search.
Mhm.
They're theorizing because they searched. They're not theorizing because they then, after they searched, researched.
Yeah, right, exactly. Mhm.
Because when you research, you develop new concepts and ideas. Now,
Mhm.
I can't develop a concept or an idea I can't make critical race theory.
Mhm.
Because Dr. David Bell made critical race theory, but I can take his theory and I can add punctuated equilibrium theory to it.
Mhm.
I can add social learning to it. I
Or
can
inter
add
or intersectionality, like,
yes, and yeah.
Kimberly,
So now
Crenshaw.
I can take his theory and now I can build off of it. And the
Mhm.
only reason that research is effective is because somebody wants to build on it. If
Mhm.
Dr. Bell had built critical race theory and nobody wanted to build on it, it'd be in the dustbin of history.
Yeah.
But now we've seen it has went beyond the purview. Now it's in education theory now. It's in medical theory now. It's growing. It's the theory is metastasizing because it can explain phenomena that nobody else can. Now let me tell you why. Because white people will not research the impact that the trauma that they put on you has done to you. They're
Right,
going
right.
to research the trauma. They will research how many more prisons we need. They will research how many more police officers we
I mean,
need, but they're not going to research the fact that this family has grown through the 3 generations and there has been no males in the home for
mhm.
3 generations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're not going to study what happens to families when they haven't had a male figure in the home for 3 generations.
Mhm.
What does it create in the individual? Why do they have this aversion to assimilation now? Because
Mhm.
the person who you would assimilate with or through is your father.
Yeah.
Because whatever he accepts, you accept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's a survival thing. And that's what I think has happened is we have compiled all of the issues and then we want to rank order them
Mhm.
because that's what we think are the important issues. And I say, listen, what they all can be important.
Yeah, right.
But when we are talking about lone wolves and we're talking about threats to our community externally,
Mhm.
who don't live in our ethnic area externally,
Mhm.
what we have to do is not make the conversation about something else.
Yeah.
That sounds rational to me. And
Right.
then if you want to talk about something else, say, hey, you know what? Let's theorize about some steps. And about you might say, well, you know what? It is important. Shay may say, you know what? It is important that we prioritize our issues and then all put unity of effort on one issue. And I say, yes, but we don't have the structure for it.
Mhm.
See,
Mhm.
see, I'm not gonna be idealistic with you if you're not being pragmatic with me.
Right. Yeah.
Give
Right.
and take. So I'd say, listen, if you want to say in Cleveland, Ohio, the black issue is this is our number one black issue.
Mm.
But where you at in South Carolina, your number one issue could be gentrification.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we need a framework that can incorporate different priorities for the same objective.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
called strategy.
Mhm.
And see,
Yeah.
my strategy has a praxis to it because it starts on the fundamental premise that me and you first, me and you, Tay, have to define what something is.
Mhm.
Once me and you define it, we can build on our definition. When someone disagrees with it and makes a better argument, then we can accept what they're saying. And because we're not married to our ideology, we only are married to fixing a problem. And whoever has the best solution, because for example, I would say this: I am not the adjudicator of best solutions. People be like, well, what should we do, Doc? I said, I'll be looking at them like, bro, I'm reading books, bro. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm reading books every
Yeah.
day to answer that question. And
Trying to
every day,
find it out.
and because I have already searched,
Yeah.
now I am researching.
Right.
But
Right.
when
Right.
I'm researching, I'm not researching to solve a problem.
Mhm.
You don't research to solve a problem. You research to understand what it is you're dealing with.
Right, to see
And
if the
most of
connection, right? Let's
yes,
figure out what the connection is. What have we been doing, or what connect? Well, 'cause right now, black people have owned the same percentage of homes that we owned in 1940. You know what I mean?
yes,
What's the connection? You know what I mean? And then we can
yes.
solve that connection. You know what I'm saying?
And yeah,
You can't solve. You
and
can't solve. gang issues in America because America loves their guns. So I'm not going to worry about that.
Yes, and when I address
Mhm,
an external issue that is affecting the Black community,
mhm,
what I see happening is, I say this, man. If you had cancer, right, and we remove the cancer from you, what should we replace the cancer with?
mm,
What should we replace it with?
mm.
You think about that? Like, what should we replace your cancer with?
Yeah.
Well, I would submit to you that we don't have to replace it with anything.
Mhm,
We can just let the body heal normally.
mhm.
And see, what people want is solutions, but they don't want to remove the cancers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, this cancer may be inoperable.
Mm,
So what you take on my report C5. So I'll talk about a second. But so once we take this idea and we bring it together, then what we end up doing is we end up seeing something that is really interesting. We
mhm,
get to see theory and practice. Most people alive don't get to do that.
mhm.
Most people don't get to see theory and practice like it should be. Because if you see theory and practice, then you'll understand that not only do we not have the answers, we are just developing the questions. you know, I looked at the Monahan report, and I tell you this, man. Okay, just so you know, anytime the government is researching issues regarding Black people, the government is researching them because it has no choice. They are researching because they have no choice. Because there is a phenomenon that is occurring in our community that they cannot explain. It's the same thing with the Kerner Commission. They had
Of
some
course.
they had some suggestions. The reason that these reports are so destructive is because they reinforce racist stereotypes. The black family is don't know how to keep their house clean.
Exactly.
And you're like, what?
What? What's that
You're
got
like,
to do with
what?
anything?
And you're like, and this becomes government policy. This affects thinking. And so when I talk to people about issues in our community, what I first say is this: is that beware of the person who can identify your problem. This is Baldwin, but can perfectly articulate your condition.
Yeah.
Because anybody who can articulate your condition understands how you got there.
Exactly.
And
And I always say that, man, if somebody can define your condition, they can define your oppression.
oppression. And what I've seen happening, it's like when they did the Kerner Commission, the Warner Commission, they had the Mullahan Commission, they had in the 1920s, one of the first ever studies on the police was done here.
Mm,
And one of the things that they found out, they say like the police operate like the mafia.
mhm.
And they said that because they operate in this way, that they're pretty much like mercenaries.
Yeah.
And what they didn't realize is that because policing was not created to control white bodies in America, they don't understand why we're concerned about it. I told them, I said, listen, policing is either done for you or policing is done for you.
Yeah.
Now, those sound similar,
Yeah.
but they're totally different.
Mhm.
And if policing is done for you, then when you see a cop, you get nervous
Yeah.
because you're here for me.
Mhm.
But when you're here for me, I see you and I'm comforted.
Yeah.
I was at a social meeting the other week and we were talking about public safety, and it's an older group. And because as a researcher, I understand that if I talk to 12 people in a homogenous group, I won't get new data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, because I'm a researcher and because I practice, I can do this in real time now.
Mhm.
I can correlate the data of people in real time in order to understand the phenomenon quicker.
Mhm.
Meaning that, like, I'm talking to these people and nobody's saying new data. So either there's groupthink happening here, or somebody is afraid to say the truth, because
Yeah.
the truth opens up a dialogue. Lies keep us quiet.
Mhm.
And so what I do is I say, listen, something needs to be said here because something is being missed. no one here represents the demographic of people 40 and younger. So no one here 40 and younger concern is being met right now. We're talking about the community, and ain't nobody from the youth here. Automatically a problem.
Yeah.
We're automatically going to have a disconnect because how older people solve problems is different. And they are not willing to accept the fact, and this is the king's disease. The king's disease is that one day the children are going to rule the house.
Yeah.
And when they do, and Kurt Vonnegut has a quote that I love. He said, one day you're going to wake up and you're going to realize that the people you went to high school with are running the country. And when you think about who you went to high school with, you're like, we in trouble. He didn't even do good at social studies. He couldn't find nothing on the map. But when we are talking about these solutions and issues and challenges, what I'd say is separate theory from practice. Now, I can theorize and practice at the same time, but it won't be effective. And it won't be effective because I won't have any feedback mechanism to tell me I'm on the wrong path. Usually that's where we need, some would say a higher power, some would say God, some would say deity, some would say secular humanists, whatever you want, whatever you believe is your North Star. And I just submit to people, whatever you think is your North Star can be your South Star if you need to be. Because when I go to conflict and I don't have all of my arsenal available to me, I am going to be defeated because all of yours is available to you.
Yeah.
And I have to understand, I have to unpack that people confuse conservative with Republican. See,
that's facts.
Because
that's
words
facts.
matter. Because a Republican is a member of a political party that has a group of people who happen to be conservative in it. Everybody who's a Republican ain't conservative.
Right, exactly.
Just because you are a Republican, it means you want a Republican form of government, which is a government of a charter. And that charter is interpreted by the people with the power to interpret that charter. That's all a Republican is. That don't mean that you like any type of thing more than anything else.
Yeah.
Conservative, meaning someone who wants to keep things the same. Because if I want to change the charter, preserve. If I want to conserve the charter, then I will not do anything that will upset the power balance. Yes. So as Black man, when there is a racial issue, in order to keep the power and keep the racists at bay, I'm not going to rock that boat. You know, even though everybody's talking about this issue, about this going on in the country, you know, I'm going to be quiet because if I speak on it, it might alienate some of my white friends.
Right. Or they do the Candace Owens thing where it's like, oh, instead of speaking on it, I'm gonna just speak against it. I'm gonna be as anti-Black as possible. Well, what about fathers in the homes?
and I'm like, okay, let's have a discussion. But do you want to have it now? Do you want to subvert the energy and the vibrations of that wicked act? And talk about something that's internal. That dude is an externality. He came in too. We couldn't control him coming to our community. We did not have gate guards at our centuries of our community checking IDs of non-Black people entering into our areas.
Well, he first went to an HBCU. He went to
North Carolina A&T.
It's in Jacksonville.
Okay.
He went to somewhere in Jacksonville. He went to an HBCU, and the police officer there, he was putting on the vest, and the police officer like turned him around instead of arresting him. So he goes across the street to the Dollar General.
Well, so when we talk about the narrative that one of the privileges that you come with whiteness is you get the benefit of the doubt. You get the benefit of the doubt from the people who have the most doubts. Meaning that if a Black person that did that, they probably would have been stopped, questioned, ID'd, and then multiply probably Terry frisked.
Yeah, a couple teeth missing, you know.
But even to that point, I think this.
Mhm.
This is so when I say black conservative, if that offends you, then it's not designed, because I'm not saying that black conservatives are racist.
Mhm.
I'm saying that they have determined logically that challenging racism ain't in their best interest
It's not in their
and
best
to
interest. Yeah.
serve.
Exactly.
That's fine. That is a determination that I'm like, look, do what you got to do. If you
Yeah.
think that's the way to go, execute, but don't try to sit on the fence.
Mhm.
Then when it is in your interest, come talking about the family. Because
Yeah,
to
yeah,
me,
yeah.
I feel like, well, if you want to talk about the family and you don't want to say nothing about the externalities, that's okay. But
Mhm.
know that your timing matters. So
Mhm.
therefore, I wait patiently for the arguments that people are going to make to make the issue not about what happened in Jacksonville, and
Mhm.
make the issue about what happened in the family.
Yeah.
Now, we will
And this
not.
is why
Yeah,
Candace Owens is anti-black,
yeah,
because
yeah,
Candace Owens' whole platform is built on being. I just want to answer this real quick.
yeah,
Candace's whole platform is built on being anti-black. It is. She have made the calculation that in order to make money, to make capital, she is going to take black experience and black issues. Remember, Candace Owens um, used the NAACP to sue because she had anti-black things happen to her, and she won a case. And so she comes out against black people all the
yeah.
time. She speaks ill of black people. Like, look, man, I really don't want to waste time talking about how Candace Owens is anti-black, man. And if you think she's not, and this is why, look, man, this is why I've adopted the mantra. Like, look, man, I can't ally with all black people. I'm sorry, I can't. And Candace is one of them. Sorry.
Oh, but see, and the thing is, if Candace changed her tune and start saying some pro-black stuff, man, they would accept her
She
back
going
the
broke.
next day.
She
But
going broke.
I'm not I'm not concerned about any specific actors in our system because
Yeah.
they are replaceable.
Hmm.
Like they're replaceable. I feel like they're not bringing anything unique to the conversation. Like you've always been around. Like you're not a new issue. You are just the people. And I think this, and this is where I think that this is where in racism there is paternalism in it,
Yes.
where
Oh.
white people see us as somehow children-like or not adultish enough to address our problems. So it's
But
more like,
with that, Doc, there are black people who want to be parented by
yes,
the overarching white society because of that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So they have a different mentality, and this is why
yeah.
they don't try to go against they don't try to go against the parents. You know
Well,
what I'm saying?
and in paternalism, it only works if I have the parental power over you.
Mhm.
Paternalism,
I say this all the time, man. And
yeah,
black, they,
but it doesn't work if I have to essentially say, listen, I am
Mhm.
not going to, I'm not thinking that the solution is going to come from the people who create the problem. I'm
Mhm.
not naive.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know that it is not in your interest to tell me the truth.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when you lie to me, I'm expecting it. It's not in your interest to tell me my history, so I'm expecting you to obscure it.
Right.
But because I'm expecting it, I at least want you to give me the courtesy to act to be honest with me and say, look, now that we know what you're doing, this is our strategy. And until we have to do something different, until we can create a situation where I don't want I don't want to I don't want black agreement.
Mhm.
I'm not
Mhm.
concerned about black people agreeing with each other. That
Right. Right.
I said, listen, if the fact that there are a minority of people who originate primarily from the Caucasus regions, and even though we don't say Caucasian because I know what that means, I know that that is not where they
Yeah.
think it is.
Yeah.
It's Persian, but that's a whole
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
issue. The term, then it's like you stole that too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. For real.
but
What it
but
is.
anyway, so I'm not as concerned about inviting people to the conversation who I don't think are going to move the conversation forward.
Mhm. Mhm.
See, I only really want to engage with people who want to move the conversation forward,
Right, 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 right.
because the conversation can stagnate if I divert the issues into Black community and Black culture. Because now I'm going to get division among Black people on what they think are the most important issues.
Mhm.
That ain't
Mhm.
important to me. My
Mhm.
thing is like, look, eh, externally, we have a threat,
Mhm.
and two people are trying to kill you. You
Mhm.
got one that's 5 feet away, and the other's 25 feet away. Now, if I said logically, which a threat should I attack first?
Yeah, the one that's 5 feet.
You think, right? That makes
Mhm.
sense. I'm going to attack the closest target to me.
Mhm.
But the sniper at
Uh,
25 feet away is eating my lunch.
mm.
Now this sniper is eating my lunch, so I can't focus on the 5 meter guy.
Oh, and that's 5 feet. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
now, so now Doc and Tay
Mhm.
are going to flank around the side to the building.
Mhm.
We are going to engage that 25-meter target while you simultaneously put fire on that 5-meter target,
Yeah,
because both threats are deadly.
yeah.
And saying that one is more deadly than the other inhibits strategy that can counteract both threats.
Mm.
Because if your situation does not account for both threats, it doesn't solve the question.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
I understand that there is an internal issue, maybe
Right.
generationally, through trauma, through poor education, through lack of finances, through resources, through slave behavior, plantation mentality. Like there's a lot of issues that you can talk about. And
Mhm.
to that guy, he said about, I want to talk about victim mentality really fast, because I believe that this thinking has been watered down to not understanding what a victim is.
Mhm.
A victim is someone who has been wronged, who has been maligned, who has had libel against them, and as a result of that has a recourse to get compensation or a redress of their grievances, either through the criminal system, through the just whatever system, right?
Mhm.
When you say victim mentality, what you're saying is, I don't want you to use the recourses that I have built for victims.
Right, exactly.
That's what you're
Yeah.
saying. I
I
don't
don't
want
want
you
you to
to.
I don't want you to do nothing. I want you to you
Well,
just
no, 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 no. I
stay
want you to do something.
stay
I
over
want you to make no excuses
there. Mhm.
for why you didn't get what you wanted to get.
Mhm.
You are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. So if you don't get something, it's because you was a bad captain, not because the internal and the external dude was eating your lunch from you. Just pop, pop. Like every time you picked your head up, it was like pop, 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 pop.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
all seen it. When you start to talk to people about strategy, like they playing checkers,
Mhm.
and these dudes is playing chess with the computer. These
Yeah.
dudes is playing chess with the computer. These dudes is playing game theory, and and you talking about family values.
Yeah,
Bruh,
family
eat
values,
your lunch.
fatherless homes, like, "Hey, bro, come on, man. We got other issues, man. We gotta address,
Yeah.
man."
And
Like
because and for solidarity purposes, I am not going to tell anybody what they think is number one ain't number one. Like
mhm,
I was talking to this one Black guy. I said, I always ask people because I want to start conversation. I said,
mhm.
what do you think the number one issue facing Black people is in this country? And he said that we don't have a rites of passage as Black people. You know, like the Jews have the bar mitzvah. They have
Oh.
we don't have an event that symbolizes you have become a man in our ethnic group.
Mhm, mhm,
That's that rite of passage. And I thought about that. As I'm thinking about it, I said, I see what you mean. Because
mhm,
that would give us a cohesive thing. Like this is once you get to this point, now we are expecting more of you.
mhm,
Because until
mhm,
you get this rites of passage, you are going to still be considered childlike.
mhm,
And
mhm,
when we don't have that, we have 40-year-old men, 50-year-old men, 60-year-old men who literally have nothing to give you.
mhm. Yeah,
Not, I'm not talking about money.
yeah.
They have nothing to give you that you can use for what you're going to be up against.
Mhm,
And that's sad because we did grow up in that generation that drugs ate a lot of our people.
Yeah, man.
Drugs ate a lot of our people. And I told this guy, I said, listen, man, when you understand that there is no fundamental difference between the drug dealer and the
man.
pastor, because they serve the same function.
Or the dude on Wall Street.
They serve the same function. One of them helps you escape your reality with the substance, and the other one helps you escape your reality with the substance. One of the substances you can see, and one you need faith for.
Yeah.
But that is why I think there's so much dichotomy in our community, because we don't understand that what grew out of our society was of necessity.
Was a survival. Survival. It was to survive. Right.
And if I could escape the reality, because remember, if power is the ability to control reality and have other people view my definition as their own, not having that makes me have nowhere to escape to.
Yeah.
There's nowhere I can go where I have that kind of authority. So now I have to escape via the substance to take me away from my reality where I have no power. Or I'm using my power on people who have no power or little power and feeling big by crushing people who don't have much.
Yeah.
And that's not legit.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. All right, man. We're gonna try to wrap this thing up, man. Have some final words. Appreciate you, Doc, coming through as always. You dig what I'm saying? I think one of my final comments, I do want to address the assimilation thing, and I really don't like, me personally, I don't like assimilation because there were people here who got colonized, and we did not assimilate to their language and their culture. Those individuals got colonized, and they their language and culture got taken away, similar to African peoples whose language and culture got taken away as well. So I always got be like, man, black people talk about assimilating, like, I don't know, man. But anyway. But yeah, man. Final words, Doc.
No, final words, man. I think that the price of security is vigilance. And I believe that what will make us vigilant is to understand that I could have been the one at that Family Dollar. Somebody made a comment on my post and they said, most people don't really care about these people. They just using them as a talking point. And that hurt, man. That hurt because I think about these people. I think about Black people just going through their day, trying to get a little snack or just that little thing at $20.
Trying to get some eggs from the grocery store.
The dude had a little baby, and he did not know that he was going to encounter some evil that ain't new.
He was 19.
Yeah, and I just believe that they're getting younger because what they've been told ain't working either.
Yeah.
See, because they haven't had to learn anything. It's making a checklist. Is my white child becoming radicalized to kill Black people? We don't have a checklist for moms to use to go on the internet. Like, you know what? Is my child spending a lot of time in foreign chat groups, talking about, are they just making racial jokes for no reason, just out of the blue?
Or anything like that, you know what I mean? I'm going to cut you off, but one of those things that it gets on my nerves, dealing with social media, is white folk who feel the need to dress up in digital blackface. Yeah. They'll create Twitter accounts and they'll have black avatars and stuff like that. They'll do this in video games. They'll do this in all of them. My bad. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
but to your point, that's what I would say is that nobody's coming to save us.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's coming to save us. And I put on the post, I said, listen, if that alone does not create Black solidarity, then nothing can. If the fact that a group of people who have determined to murder you just for being a certain way or skin color, there is no therapy for this.
Yeah.
This is confronted, and I don't know. The question still remains to anybody who can answer it. at what number do we have to get to, or what body count number, if that makes any sense? What body count number do we have to get to before we can talk seriously, openly, and candidly about these issues? And that's what I got.
All right, man. Appreciate you, Doc, man. Appreciate everybody that tuned in, man. This podcast will be out on a podcast form tomorrow. Because I'm gonna be home. Telework. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, man. Appreciate everybody tuning in, man. Appreciate you, Doc.
All right,
y'all have a great week. All right, man. We out.
yeah.